grab my laptop. Number 3. So I decided to visit the deep web, the dark web, whatever the fuck it's called, you know what I'm talking about. The internet's lowest circle of evil, a place where pathologies abound, where pedophiles and drug dealers run amok, arms merchants and killers for hire. My purpose? Call it morbid curiosity. I was looking for the most extreme content I could find. I consider myself a student of the human condition and am fascinated by man's darker urges, his apparent hatred of himself. I wanted to measure the depths of his depravity and see what I could find. Knowledge for its own sake, or something. I come from a wealthy family and have never known want. Money was never a problem for me. I figured I would have to pay for my curiosity and load it up on web cash and Bitcoin. Several $1,000s worth. I won't detail the directions to this dark web. If you have the desire, it only takes a little bit of research. You'll also want to use a pro computer unless you're a little technical. After 2 weeks of searching and being continuously ripped off, finally came across something that really interests me. I was learning the so-called red rose. And after some exchanges of inserting someone on a certain message board, I was provided with a live stream. He assured me it was genuine and unlike anything I had ever seen. I have no doubt it was real. If you saw it, you would know. It cost me a mere $500. The camera displayed a room about the size of a large bedroom. Walls covered the floor. It appeared to be a giant rock to one corner. Opposite this was a kid's swimming pool filled with water. I couldn't imagine there was housing in place. Suddenly, a portion of the ceiling disappeared, and the girl, upside down, was lowered into the room. She was suspended by the feet of what looked like giant forceps. Her hands were bound behind her back and taped over her mouth. She looked to be about 20 years old, maybe younger. Needless to say, she was terrified. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then, under the rock, a head appeared. It was a snake. An anaconda, I believe. Slowly, very slowly, he emerged from his hive and warmed his tongue, tasting the air. The girl's eyes bulged from her head with the most profound terror I had ever seen. The snake continued its creeping advance. It was fucking huge. It had to be at least 30 feet long. His face rose to within inches of her, tongue darting in and out. He loomed above her long, coiled aggression. Mercifully, she fainted. Whatever was holding the forceps began to shake the girl like someone dangling a toy from a cat. The snake's head pulled back slightly, tongue slipped flickered. He remained still for a few long seconds. Then, without warning, he struck. His jaws clamped down on her throat and his body whipped around her with tremendous speed. He took her to the floor and proceeded to squeeze the life from her as the giant forceps were lifted from the room and the ceiling panel replaced. I watched, stunned, as the snake uncoiled and released his teeth from her throat. He then unhinged his jaw and began to swallow her. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. It was all bought and paid for by me. See you in hell, I guess. Number 4. I'm posting this through a proxy, so don't even think about getting cute and trying to find me. I've got enough trouble with people trying to find me as it is. It all started a few months ago when I found a good source of amphetamines on a deep web marketplace I won't name. I live in a town so small and bland that even the local high school kids don't bother selling drugs. It's boring as sin here, which is one of the reasons I started ordering speed online in the first place. I was always very cautious. I tumbled my bitcoins carefully and ensured that every transaction was very well encrypted. Yes, before you even asked, the proxies I used were fully configured and trustworthy ones. It wasn't the technology that failed me at all, actually. It was a single mistake in judgment. To a single trusted seller, I gave my real physical address. At first, I was only getting small packages for my personal use, so it was easy to have them delivered to the house of an old woman who lives nearby. Her live-in nurse consistently checked the mail very late in the day, so there was never much of an issue in her trimming the speed before it was noticed. But my habit grew, and I began to introduce my close friends to the go. So eventually I contacted my seller about ordering much larger quantities, enough for me to sell locally. We began to work like business partners in the supply chain, and I was placing substantial orders regularly. Drugs came originally in a small padded envelope, but now it had to be shipped in a larger cardboard box. The envelopes always fit easily inside a mailbox, and a box like this would have to be delivered to the front door. I couldn't have the mailman walking up to a stranger's driveway to ring the doorbell, so I requested that the drugs start being sent directly to me. I knew by this point that the seller was a legitimate and reliable source, so trusting him with my address just seemed safer than the alternative. We had become something like casual friends at this point, and began to do the same things together, like visit the same deep web communities and chat and weird words online. My seller was wickedly funny sometimes, and really seemed to be a nice guy. I guess that's part of why I trusted them. Then again, it's not his fault about what happened. Recently, though, I got a totally unsatisfactory shipment. Pressed pills looked right at first, tasted like bitter flour, parched brittle. They produced no high at all. I had been sniffed. When I checked the marketplace, I found that my seller's accounts had been closed out. He left no messages to explain it. I assumed that he had just ripped me off, but it also didn't seem like something he would do. I wondered if I had misjudged him. Yesterday, I noticed that one of his accounts was actively posting on one of the small community forums that we both visited together. I contacted him immediately in private message and asked whether he knew that his last batch was complete bunk. It took about 25 minutes before I got any response. But suddenly, messages became pouring in. It started with this. The person you're trying to contact has passed away. Sorry. He's such a homebody. Nobody's knocked on his door the whole time I've been here. 3 full weeks with no visitors. Isn't that funny? Almost like eating him. I was very soft tissue. He had almost no food in the house when I killed him, so I didn't need to clear out the fridge to store his meat. I haven't even needed to take out the trash yet. Isn't that so funny? I had him poking around his computer too. Going through his files is like solving a big puzzle cube. But I'm making it fast. I wrote back and accused him of taking a weird joke too far. I told him that he at least owed me an explanation for the last shipment. His response: "Your bone meal. You never smelled bone meal? Did you never have a garden as a kid or anything? I thought that'd be obvious." The skeleton was the only thing I hadn't figured out what to do with yet. I realized that I could solve that issue and also play a little prank. Come on, don't you think that's a funny idea? There was a brief pause, and then another short volley of messages appeared before I could even form my response. You know, you actually don't live too far away from where I am now. Judging by the address I have here, you and this guy are just over the state line from each other. Isn't that something? Well, be seeing you. What do you guys think? It's probably just a scheme to scare me off, right? Let's go to dinner. Yeah. I didn't buy anything. Some people like to think that the deep web is a joke. It's not. In no way is it a place some half-assed show-off should even think about stumbling into. In fact, I would tell you the most seasoned hackers with any fiber of a moral compass to stay the fuck away from that place. Because it's a place that will scar you and leave you terrified to follow the cyberfootprints left by someone else's shadow ever again. I know this because I'm a hacker. Or, at least I used to be one. I have been using computers since I was 12 years old. I had always been fascinated with the idea of being a cyber crusader, determined to find the new uncharted territories of the internet. I'd gotten pretty good at utilizing bits of software here and there, and it even got to the point where the slow crawl of dial-up internet didn't even affect me anymore. Especially when you knew what processes you wanted active and which ones you could afford to kill to increase the crawl rate of your PC. In other words, I had a pretty good idea of what I was doing. By the time I was 20 years old, I could both safely and confidently call myself an ace when it came to hacking. I could keep up with the best and had made a name for myself among many other netizens on the web. In fact, I was among the few thousands who had managed to come up with a formula to hack the Google search bar in order to delve deeper into the directories to get what we wanted. Call it our own personal attack for having bought the rights for YouTube and slapping content creators with copyright infringements left and right. The early years of YouTube back then were not pretty. I had my channel taken down several times because of Google's little purchase. But that's neither here nor there. This plays no bearing on the story. I'm simply giving you a little history lesson, especially for all the younger netizens out there. Anyone who was a hacker knew about the deep web. It pretty much had the same purpose as most would speculate it does today. Drugs, guns, illegal imports, you name it, and that place pretty much had it. The deep web was, and is, the gateway to what is known as the global black market. I had purchased a few goods during that time and had a decent amount of drugs. It was about halfway through the first semester at my school. Sophomore year of college was my time to be stoned almost constantly, so I was a regular customer on the digital black market. Most of my friends came to me for the hookup, and I could always come to a pretty good deal based on my frequent interactions with sellers on the net. To access the deep web, you didn't have things like Tor browsers, not back then. To access the darker side of the web, you needed to know what you were doing. Ghost hacking, proxies, parent directories, backdoors, scramblers, dump sites. These are all terms hackers utilized years back and when Java was not as prevalent in browsers as they are today. Back in the day, it was often referred to as the dark net. I don't know if I transitioned into the deep web and I don't really care. I'm never going back. I had just gotten some new equipment for my computer. The CRT I had been using finally could wait an hour in your monitor and some more RAM. I was pretty set to go. My plan was to try and barter for a better soundboard when I could afford it with the vendors I went to on the dark net. I was setting up to do a little bit of gaming when I noticed I had an alert from one of my net friends saying they had stumbled across something interesting. A series of black boxes that, when opened, seemed to lead you down another web directory. It was like tunneling, but more vast. Knowing my curious nature, he had passed the information on to me, knowing I would want to follow up on this information. I was one of the few vagrant hackers in my circle, an explorer, mindlessly taking one path and then another and opening up a door and seeing where it goes. Most times you would come across a treasure trove of information, or a dead end. He hadn't cut any corners when he broke down everything to me. His start point, the different pathways he had stuck. Challenge accepted. I quickly glanced over the data and hurried moving up the ghost tags and IP scramblers. I needed to have holes in front of me knocked out of the way as well as being able to cover my own ass. With the new encryption I had made, I would be able to latch onto an existing IP address for 30 seconds before bouncing to another one, making it seem like I had disappeared. This was great in theory, but forced my movements to be slow when it came to being able to do things on my sad little Inspiron. In 10 short minutes, I was ready to go. Like he had shown me, I followed his pathways and activated my encryptions to keep myself safe, wandering from parent directory to parent directory. It didn't take long for me to run into the first black box. Just a basic encryption that took almost no time to break through. Inside was a directory with 4 different subdirectories. I knew that the second link was where my friend went, but my curiosity led me to pick the first one. In about 3 minutes, I realized it was a dead end, so I quickly backtracked and made my way to the main directory, deciding that I wouldn't deviate from his original path. In about half an hour, I ran through all 6 black boxes. Coming across the 7th, then realized that the encryption on this particular box was very different. Every hacker, no matter how good, leaves a sort of information behind. You just have to know what to look for. I knew my friend had been here, and this is where he had gotten stuck. This was a unique lock, one that I knew would take a bit of time to break through the encryption. It was Thursday night. I'd finished up my work early for a change, and I wasn't called into work, so I had time to kill. Now this box was a tricky little shit. I had never run across so many tedious things to break through in my entire life. It was more annoying than an actual challenge. A tug here, a pull there, slipping and dipping and moving around all the different codes in an attempt to decipher just what all this information entailed. But I wasn't allowed the luxury of lingering because the minute I got distracted to see and understand what exactly I was swimming through, the encryption would completely kick me out of the box, forcing me to start all over again. After another 45 minutes, I managed to break through and I felt like I was sitting on top of the world, but the only problem was that I was in another directory again. Except this time, there was only one thing inside of it. It was a redirect hyperlink labeled WTTMH. I was too happy to know I'd broken through the damn encryption code blocking this pathway that I didn't even stop to think and wonder what those letters meant. Like a fucking pleb, I just clicked on the link and let it redirect me. My ghost was active, so I wasn't worried about being traced. It did its thing, redirecting me to another website. This site took a little bit longer to load, possibly because my ghost was attempting to filter and tunnel through anything that would have pinged me on someone's radar. This was also an indication that I had entered through a back door, one that I really didn't have any business utilizing, but I did anyway. When messing around in the darknet, you only ever used the back entrance onto pages if you thought you were the shit and didn't think you'd get caught. That, you were the site manager themselves. About 5 minutes later, the webpage finally loaded up. Soft, creepy carnival music played in the background, barely above the sound of a whisper. Even with headphones on, I had to really pay attention to take notice of it. Across the window, in big, bold letters, read, "Welcome to the Monkey House." I was immediately intrigued. Being the huge Kurt Vonnegut fan that I am, I recognized the title for what it was. But for anyone who has read the compilation of short stories, I assumed I was about to walk into a place full of rebels preaching on their soapboxes like they were Harrison Bergeron. I wished that had been the case. I wished it more than anything now that I think back on it. A window popped up on the bottom right of the browser, a chat window and a greeting message. I'll never forget the way my heart almost shrank in on itself in response to that grave box. It read, "Welcome to the Monkey House, home of all the chills and thrills you can imagine and some even beyond your wildest dreams. Would you like a guided tour?" Despite my interest, I didn't want to linger around in this place. The host was most likely surveying the area and monitoring all traffic flows spilling onto the site. Hell, the site owner could have very well been the one pinging that automated message to me right that second. "No thank you," I wrote. If you insist, do you already know your way around the monkey house then? I don't think I've seen you around here before. No, I was referred by a friend. I couldn't believe I just straight up lied like that, but I had panicked. Something told me that this wasn't some bot. I was talking to a real person and I already knew I was a lot further in the darknet than I normally wandered into. They could eat me alive if I gave them a single reason to get suspicious of me. Their response. Oh, you mean for the event this evening? We had given guest vouchers to all of our VIP members so they could invite their friends to tonight's special event. Event? What the fuck? There was an event? I decided I would just play along so as not to give myself away. I had clearly come across a membership-only site, waltzing in through the back door like I owned the place. Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I don't know my way around and I don't see any guided links telling me where I need to go or even where I can go. Well, you wouldn't be able to see any of that with a guest voucher anyway. The monkey house is membership only, and the only way in is either through a voucher or an actual invitation. This explains why I didn't recognize your IP address. My heart dropped into my stomach. Oh shit, you can see my IP. Which meant that if I didn't turn off my piggyback code, they would see my IP change right before their eyes. Panicking, I quickly pulled up my command prompt window and stopped my ghost from scrambling my IP and lashing onto another person's as they passed within my latch zone. I stared at my now static IP address, listing that I was from Turkey. I see. Well, the event will be starting soon. Just follow this link when you're ready. Chatting is free, but the picture quality will be reduced to SD resolution since you're just a guest. HD is for members only. I understand. Basic etiquette applies. You will receive one warning and then afterwards you will be banned. You are free to leave before the event has concluded, but your IP will be permanently blocked from regaining entry unless you are able to get a personal invitation to return back to the monkey house. Your IP has been locked for future reference so that we may extend an invitation to you in the future. We will not be held responsible for any physical, emotional, or psychological trauma that you may incur due to attending the event. Do you understand the rules? I was so fucked. Yes, I understand. Excellent. Well, as previously stated, just click on that link that I provided and it will take you directly to where the event is being taken place. Thank you for coming and enjoy the show. The window disappeared off my screen and all I could do was stare at the website. The dark carnival music continuing to play softly in the background. A ticker flashed across the top of my screen announcing that the event would be taking place in just a few short minutes. I suspected that I was still being monitored, so I clicked on the link and it redirected me to another page, where I went on the stage and velvet red curtains were drawn. Ambient sounds that you would normally hear in a theater. The hushed whisperings of the audience, shuffling of programs, and even a person coughing every so often could be heard. I was impressed. They'd certainly gone all out for this thing, whatever it was. When it got to about 10 minutes till the launch, another window popped up on my screen. This time blocking the first and different screen names began to pop up inside as people came into the room. It was clearly a group chat window, the one that would allow all of us to talk to each other when the show began. Some people immediately passed off greetings as though they were being reunited with old buddies from the game and not being back a beer. I hadn't chosen a screen name yet, remaining as the default anonymous 10235 or whatever the fucking number was at the end of it. A soft piano sound rang out and we watched the animated curtains part, and behind it was a video screen, more than likely connected to some live feed. The camera was off and the transmission was offline as stated in the top right corner of the window. People's excitement was clear in the chat and they all discussed what the event would be about. It must have been an understatement to talk in detail about what had been previously showcased in another session, as no one dared to drop hints or blatantly speak about what they had seen before. This was crazy. I was scared before I had even really did anything. Nothing was happening and I felt extremely on edge. That should have been my first sign that I needed to get the hell out of there. But I still hadn't said anything. Someone took note that I hadn't either. Hey, you think Anon went AFK? I went wide-eyed at the screen. Don't know. Yo, Anon, where you at? Say something, creeping-ass motherfucker. That chill ran down my back, slow and unsettling before I let my fingers fly across the keys. The first was to change my screen name. Woodkey Blaster. It was a desperate attempt to combine two aliases I'd previously been known for into one thing. My mind switched back into hacker mode and I cleared my throat some, still mentally bracing myself for what was about to happen. I'll say something when I've got something to say, which won't be much, seeing as how the show's getting ready to start. A few boos and oh snap in response. I wasn't about to get an ego over some smart-ass comment. Not when I was in unknown territory like this. In hindsight, I should have just left. I should have just said, there. But I was too afraid of giving myself away, especially now that I had bothered to open my stupid mouth. A hailstorm of messages flooded the chat, mostly people counting down the seconds as we hit the 1 minute mark. A time ticker appeared over the video window mounted on the stage when it hit 30 seconds. They went from white to pink and then a shade of red, growing darker as the numbers decreased slowly to 1. 0 was completely blood red and then disappeared from the screen as static appeared in the video frame. The show was about to begin. A person with a mask appeared on the screen. The mask, a stark porcelain white with a pair of painted blue eyes and a black twisted smirk spreading across the lower portion of it. Their wild, matted hair stuck out around the edges of the mask, the rest hidden by a silk top hat. He was dressed to the nines, a deep red and black three-piece suit and half-cape draped over one of his shoulders. He held a long, black chain with a silver skull atop the handle as the decorative piece. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. For all returning members, it is so very good to see you again. As for all the newcomers, I welcome you to the Monkey House. I'm your host, Hans Twilight, the ringleader of this humble little carnival of mine. I couldn't help but laugh a little, feeling some of my anxiety wash away. What the fuck was I watching? I had been so worried about a sideshow freak like this. Jovial music played in the background of the video and I leaned back in my chair, silently fussing at myself for having gotten so worked up over nothing. We have a very special treat in store for all of you this evening. Are you ready for this little show of ours to begin? The chat room was soon flooded with messages confirming that they were, in fact, ready. Hans appeared to be looking off to the right where the window was and he let out a chuckle. Holding the cake between both of his leather-gloved hands, he leaned towards the camera a bit more and tilted his head to the side. Very well, let the show begin. He stepped away from the screen, giving out a wide, flourishing gesture with his cane as he pointed the tip to an area behind him. It was too dark to see anything until an overhead light came on, illuminating a man strapped to a table who was wearing an elephant mask. He struggled against the leather straps binding him just as a buzzsaw roared to life at the space between his legs by his ankles. There was applause being heard in the video, something I had assumed and hoped was just an audio track that was playing in response. The chat was going crazy with excitement as my heart sank into the pit of my stomach, the realization of what was happening hitting me. I immediately covered my mouth with my hands. Oh my god. Starting out the night, we have Ringo, ladies and gentlemen. You all casted your votes last week and we held a little competition to see who this week's winning executioner would be. Trixie Mir 571, you are this week's winner and get to choose how each of our 3 attractions get to die. Your entry, Death by Table Saw, is what helped you win the competition, so here it is. I watched as that very screen name began to type out her gleeful screams and everyone else congratulated her, all except me. Did no one care about the muffled screams of the man strapped to the fucking table saw? What the fuck is wrong with these people? I was sitting there, literally watching as Trixie typed more stuff into the chat window. I wanted to tell myself that this wasn't real, that this couldn't be real. But as Trixie typed out that she wanted the man to be slowly inched forward towards the saw, it became horrifically clear that this was in fact real. Two men unstrapped his restraints and the elephant man immediately began fighting against them. Sadly, the other guys were bigger and stronger than him, each grasping for his respective wrists and ankles. His screams began to elevate as his legs were spread and arms held straight up above him. The sound of blades cutting into human flesh is no different than the sound of a butcher carving into a hunk of meat. The hum of the buzzsaw escalated as soon as it made contact, and the spray of blood that followed made me turn my head and cover my mouth. Elephant Man's screams were now a high-pitched squeal, and had I not been so afraid of vomiting, I would have used both of my hands to cover my ears. So I was greeted by the sounds of death while closing my eyes. I couldn't watch, I just couldn't, but the sound of meat being sawed through, the cracking of bones and the spray of blood intermingled with the horrible sounds of his screams would be forever burned into my mind. I ignored these sick bastards in the chat room because they were clearly all getting their fucking rocks off on this shit. During my time moving around in the darknet, I had heard rumors about stuff like this. These twisted shows with nothing but horrible people and guaranteed deaths for their victims. Each member paid monthly dues or some other bullshit, and the worst part was that the general public wanted more. They paid to watch people get tortured and killed and then cast aside while much of a care in the world. It was fucking murder. It fell forever before only silence remained in that place. That fucking audience applause track played again along with the dark carnival music. It wasn't until I opened my eyes to look back at my computer screen that I realized I had been crying. Never in my 20 years of life had I ever experienced anything so fucking messed up. I was that young person who had grown up believing in the good in everyone, that all people deserved a second chance. Not these guys. They all needed to be dumped off in a nuclear waste zone and left there to fend for themselves. Every single one of them. But I couldn't call them out on it. I couldn't threaten to tell the cops either. It would have been nothing for one of those guys on his team, or even the actual site host to look at my static IP and realize I was actually piggybacking off of someone else. And without a way to escape, they'd zero in on my true IP address and quite possibly hunt me down. Actually, no. Scratch that. They would hunt me down. I tried to exit out of the browser just to pull myself out of that nightmare. My browser wouldn't close, not even hard killing it through the task manager did anything. Some kind of script on the site was preventing me and everyone else from being able to close the browser. We were locked in. We couldn't get out. I couldn't get out. Well, that was certainly colorful, wasn't it? Let's have Bridget come out now. The next victim was brought out. A young woman wearing a tiger mask. She was sitting in a cloth with a bathtub filled with water. A live battery and jumper cable situated on the table nearby. No, fuck. I didn't care anymore. I could watch another second of this. I activated my command prompt. I was going to kill these scripts one at a time if I needed to. I just needed to take enough of a hole for me to wiggle out of. Just enough to get myself out and have it seal itself shut behind me. Since I assumed I was the only one trying to get out, and then a couple of scripts dying here and there wouldn't bring me any unwanted attention. The very second I killed one script, a separate chat window popped up onto my screen. I've been waiting on you to make your move. My mouth went dry almost instantly, my hands frozen as they hovered above the keyboard. No, they couldn't have noticed that. It was just some basic, insignificant code that wouldn't have affected any of the scripts on the current page. It was just some silent background coding. I decided to play dumb. What are you talking about? You think I don't recognize a fucking ghost hacker when I see one? God fucking damn it. I had been so careless, I knew I had. I should have never let my curiosity get the better of me. I'll give you some credit though. I know you're not in Turkey, but you're doing a fan-fucking-tastic job at misdirecting me from your real one. Now I was scared. I was fucking terrified. This person was trying to put a crack in the only shield of protection I had in this place. If I had known this was going to happen, I wouldn't have bothered making my IP static in the first place. My misdirection sequence would only be successful for so long before it finally lost its effect and I would be discovered. This was my first time running across another hacker with malicious intent against me. I didn't know what I would expect or what would come of me the moment I was caught, but I didn't care anymore. Without blinking, I reached behind my rig and pulled the power supply cord loose from the machine. My screen went dark and the carnival music was no more. I didn't waste another second. Getting my tools out, I started dismantling my tower, all but ripping parts out of the machine before dumping memory sticks and various other components into the bathroom sink. I flooded them in the basin without a second thought, returning to my room and grabbing a handful of refrigerator magnets and started running them across everything that had been inside my rig. My roommate walked in just as I was stripping the shell of my rig to the bare minimum, and when she asked what I was doing, I told her that it was in her best interest and I'd cry about it. Not that I would have told her anyway. It's safe to assume I tore the ever-living shit out of my machine. It's also safe to assume that for the next 6 months, I didn't go anywhere near a computer that wasn't part of campus property, and outside of my school email, I erased all of my previous emails and messenger names, even the ones dating back as far as middle school. I did everything I could to erase my very existence off the internet world for a time and stop being a hacker altogether. I hadn't even let any of my contacts know I was going off the grid on the net. Maybe it was better for them not to know. I never did tell my friend that I managed to break through that last black box. I still haven't, even after all these years. I don't know if that place is still running or not, or if after 8 years, the person in charge finally just had enough and threw it all away. To tell you the truth, I don't want to know either. I took one thing from that experience and made one wish, that for the rest of my life, I'd never see a message addressed to me saying, "Welcome to the Monkey House." This story is told in the perspective of a female. This is my first time talking about this since it happened. Thinking about it still brings back feelings that are hard to describe. But I've been listening to similar stories from other survivors and deciding this story might be therapeutic for me in some way. It might also help somebody else who has strangers. This happened to me a few years back. I was 21, but I looked like I was 15. I've always been smaller than everyone else my age, and I'm smart enough to know that sometimes looking young can attract a lot of attention. Unfortunately, on this night, my guard was down. I had been drinking with each other for most of the night. We were all pretty drunk, so I don't remember why we had gotten into a fight, but for some inebriated reason, that was probably really stupid. We did. I wanted to get away from the screaming and yelling, so I left. I was crying so hard I could barely see, but I managed to make it to the end of our street, which was only 2 houses away. And that's when he saw me. He was older than me, probably in his 30s. He was driving an older white car on 79, and he had a big dog in the backseat. He saw me crying and stepped out. He slammed on his brakes and reversed back to where I was standing. He asked me if I was okay, and I told him no. He asked if I needed a ride, and I told him yes, which turned out to be a huge mistake. Now I knew not to get into cars with strangers, but I was so drunk and mad that I really didn't care at the time. And he had his dog with him, so I figured he was just a normal guy. But after that, it was 2 in the morning. This guy was randomly driving around with his dog and didn't even register with me. I got into his car and he started driving. Now, I don't remember much of what happened from the time I got into his car to the time I started realizing something was wrong. But I do remember a couple details that probably saved my life. When I first got into his car, I asked him how to use his cell phone to call my friend and ask her if I could stay at her house. He let me, but he made me call her on private. I just thought he didn't want strangers to have his number. I asked her to meet me at the Kroger's right down the street from where I was. All 2 minute drive. She said okay. After that, I started talking to the guy, probably rambling about nothing, lost in my own conversation, so lost that I didn't realize that we had been driving for more than 2 minutes. Actually, it had been more like 10 minutes. I finally stopped talking and stared out the window. My heart started pounding and my hands began sweating. We were no longer in the city I lived in. In fact, we were surrounded by trees in the middle of nowhere. There was no sign of another living person anywhere, not even a street light, and the dirt road we were driving on hadn't been used in a very long time. I sat there in silence while he slowly drove down this road, and all I could think is, he's going to kill me when we get to the end of this road. I'm going to die tonight and nobody knows where I am. They'll never find me. A million things were going through my head. Fear is not a strong enough word to describe how I felt. Petrified maybe. After about another minute of driving in silence, we reached the end of the road. There was an old abandoned house and nothing else. Finally, I got enough courage to talk. I stared straight ahead, too scared to turn to look at him and ask him what he wanted me to do. He didn't say anything. Instead, he pulled his pants down and revealed himself to me. He sat there waiting for me to act on his silent demand. I didn't know what to do. I definitely didn't want to do what he wanted me to do, but I didn't think I could run away either. What if he made his dog chase me? What if he had a gun or some other weapon? I had no idea where I was. He did. He could easily chase me if I tried to run in my drunken state, and we both knew. So I did the only thing I thought I could do at the time. I complied. I did exactly what he wanted me to do. I thought about biting him as hard as I could, but just as I started thinking that, I felt something hard on the back of my head. I'm not sure if it was actually a gun or not. I never saw it, but I didn't want to risk my life if it was. I felt sick, disgusted. I was shaking from fear so badly that it was hard to do what he wanted. Finally, he pulled my head up, and it was at that point that I realized I did have a way out of this. He had allowed me to use his power. He had me on a trip back to him and something would have happened to me. Making me use private doesn't stop the FBI from tracing me. I just hoped he knew that too. So before he could make me do anything else, I told him. Sarah is probably really worried about me, and she knows I called her from a stranger's phone. He sat there for what seemed like forever, and I could see that he was realizing the same thing. He didn't say a single word. He started the car and drove out of the woods back towards the city and my home. For the first time, I actually started to breathe again. I felt like I had just saved my own life, but I wasn't his yet. He could change his mind and turn around at any second. I didn't move at all. I couldn't. I didn't pay attention to the street names and any signs I saw, though. I knew I was going to the police, and I wanted to give them as much information as possible. Finally, we were at the program. Sarah was actually still there waiting for me. She was terrified that something had happened to me, and when she saw me, I could see the relief on her face. The man didn't say anything as I got out of the car. I struggled to walk to Sarah's car. I was still shaking very badly. As soon as I sat down, got the door shut, and saw that the man was gone, I burst into tears. I told Sarah everything as she drove us to her house. Once I was there, I called the police. They sent a car out not long after, and I told the officer what happened. He asked me to ride with him to the hospital so they could do a re-kit and try to get some DNA. I agreed and we went to the nearest hospital. My boyfriend and my mom met me there. I had never been so happy to see my mom. I had to tell the doctors and all the newspapers what happened about 10 times. I was so sick of telling it, of reliving it, and it had only happened a couple of hours ago. I just wanted to go home and go to bed. A week later, I was sitting at home watching the news. They were talking about a girl who had gone missing. She was last seen walking her dog in a popular park about 50 miles north of where I lived. I didn't think too much about it at the time, other than hoping that she was okay. Another week passed and I was watching the news again. They found the girl. She was dead. strangled to death and left in a drainage ditch. She was only 14. When they showed the picture of the man who had killed her, I almost passed out. It was the same man. I know I shouldn't, but sometimes I blame myself. If I could have remembered more details, maybe they could have got him. Maybe she could still be alive. I still live with these thoughts 8 years later. And that's my story. Everything in this story is true. It was one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. To truly believe you are about to die. That is a feeling that you can't describe. I'm just glad I'm able to tell it. So to begin this story, I'd like to state that I'm a 17-year-old female that is out of a traditional high school. Also, I'm feeling popular in the Vine community, so there's people contacting me. People have been creepy in my comments for as long as I can remember, so when I see people posting weird comments on my content, I just brush it off and delete the comments. But one person took it too far. I put my Snapchat on Vine one night. Keep in mind, it's my personal Snapchat, but I wasn't expecting many people to follow me. A couple of my loyal Vine followers followed me, and one person who had been an unintentional creep, but I didn't care much. On my personal Snapchat, you can see where I work and go to school, but I never thought much of it because it was always my personal one. So, the one creep started snapping me messages like, "Hey, let's hang out tonight," at like 1 or 3 a.m. I never responded because I was either asleep or I just never wanted to. But they were relentless when it came to hanging out. They kept asking me and asking, but I never answered. Until one day, they messaged me, "Are you working Westlake? What? I live in Portland Hills. You're not a target." At this point, I responded simply saying, "Please don't." They didn't message me for the next couple of days. That is, until the weekend. I got Snapchats from them while I was at work. I opened them, and they were pictures of me at my check lane. I immediately got freaked out, but I tried to brush it off. I received 7 more photos of me at work or walking to my car in the parking lot that weekend. I fully freaked out and decided to tell my mum. Her only reaction though was that it was probably one of my friends fucking with me. This did not help. The next couple of weeks, they were quiet, and they didn't message me. My phone started having problems though, so I used it less. I took it to the repair center, and they said that someone had hacked my fucking cloud off my phone. I was astonished and done with everything at that point. However, I didn't